I'm Ben Meiselas from the MeidasTouch Network. This Kimberly Guilfoyle deposition is just devastating and humiliating for her. I mean, we could potentially talk about the criminal implications. She was clearly evasive and lying to the January 6th committee questioner, but it's just humiliating and embarrassing. Now, Kimberly Guilfoyle, before stepping into MAGA world, was a respected prosecutor before pivoting to Fox and all of this. And so to just see this weird bizarreness is frankly really sad. But let's just explore what Kimberly Guilfoyle said in her deposition before the January 6th committee. If we turn to page 271 and 272, she talks about the speech that she gave at the Ellipse on January 6th. And what she says at line 17, she goes, yeah, there's some time that passes because that's how it always does. The president likes there always to be music. He has a soundtrack that he plays of his pre-approved song that he plays at every rally every once in a while to make changes to it, etc. And he likes to do that, build momentum. And then he gets up and does his thing. And that's just how it is. So then the question is, I'm just trying to figure out the timeline. At this point, when you finish your speech, you're hanging out in the tent, right? Answer, freezing and dying, hoping he comes. Question, I think this is when I believe the video happens that Don Jr. is filming. Is that right? Answer, yes, because they're playing the music, right, which is the president's approved soundtrack of songs, and one of them that plays at all his rallies besides YMCA is Gloria. I don't know what the name of the song is. And they go on, I think it's YMCA by the Village People. And then she goes, have you watched any Trump rallies? And then the person goes, no, it's actually a song I believe called Gloria. I believe the name of the song is called Gloria. Oh, yes, that is the song. The 80s pop song thing, yes, but also plays YMCA. And then she goes on to say, it's very distinct soundtrack that I believe he has a heavy hand in. So Miss Guilfoyle, exactly, based on what we understood, is this correct? And so this is Kimberly Guilfoyle's response to the January 6th committee lawyer asking her these questions. She goes, so they played that, and I am a child of the 80s, and so I like that. And Don's like, princess. I think he said, princess, show us your dance moves. And I'm a good dancer. This is what Kimberly Guilfoyle is doing on January 6th, leading up to the insurrection. And she's talking to the January 6th committee about what a good dancer she is. As we go through other portions of the deposition testimony, she really tries to evade how important it was for her to get paid the approximately $60,000. But the January 6th committee lawyer really kind of drills down on the fact that she was paid this money. Not only was she paid this money, but she specifically asked for this money. And in fact, she said, no matter what, whether she speaks or not, she wanted to get paid the $60,000 from Turning Point, which is Charlie Kirk's organization, the MAGA extremist who invoke the Fifth Amendment against self-incrimination to every question that he was asked. So as we go to page 36 and we go to line 18, the questioner starts talking about the speaking fees, and it says, the lawyer goes, okay, so yes, there are speaking fees at January 6th. And then Kimberly Guilfoyle goes, I cannot say that they're speaking fees for January 6th because we also spoke in December at a Turning Point USA event, Student Action Committee. The question, just give me a moment. We have a copy of the invoice that was created, yes. And to be clear, I did not create the invoice. And then they go down, as we look down, we can go to page 38, and the questioner, the bottom of page 37, the lawyer says, okay, and we'll talk about this, but while we have the exhibit up, if you can look at the middle of the email, you respond, you say, quote, so actually we're going ahead and we're going to invoice $60,000 to True Media. Just by the way, True Media is Kimberly Guilfoyle's LLC. It's her pass-through LLC. And in the same email, she writes, I talked to Don for Kimberly Guilfoyle, Donald Trump Jr. for Wednesday, January 6th, and I will just 1099 him and I'll wire money. So it's my True Media LLC and Chase bank account number and routing. And Rebecca, you have it. Thank you so much. Question. So I just want to ask pieces about that. With regards to where you wrote, I talked to Don, I'm assuming that's Don Jr., and the questioner goes on to say, and for Wednesday, January 6th. So, Kimberly Guilfoyle, you were specifically identifying that this payment was for January 6th. Answer. That's what it says here, yes, because Kimberly Guilfoyle was trying to avoid saying that it was for January 6th. And so eventually she had to be reflective of what the document actually said. One of the other things that she acted like in her deposition is that she didn't know what was going on or that she had no involvement in anything. And yet there's messages saying KG, which is her initials, wants to make sure that Steve Bannon is involved in these discussions. And when she's confronted with that, she goes, I can't recall, I don't know. So if we go to page 233 and we go to line 21 in the deposition, the question is, do you remember having any discussions with Trump or any of the family members regarding the legal options available on January 6th? Answer. No, because that wasn't something that I would have gone over or discussed because I actually didn't understand it myself, she says. Then she goes on to say, as we go to page 234, she goes, yeah, information out there like that, but I don't know what it is. The president felt that the election was rigged and stolen and that he wanted all legal and lawful votes to be counted and for unlawful votes not to be counted. So that's where his head was in the general election. Question. Do you remember proposing to anyone who would have been around mid-December 2020 that Steve Bannon and the president should meet to talk because Mr. Bannon had information regarding next steps to stop the steal? Answer from Kimberly Guilfoyle. I don't recall anything about Stop the Steal. Then the questioner pulls out an Exhibit 44, which is a text message from John McEntee, who's listed as Johnny Mac and someone else in the administration or who's an advisor. And it says, KG, referring to Kimberly Guilfoyle, wants Steve and POTUS to talk. Steve has 3 next steps that he can take to stop the steal. Also says he needs to meet with Navarro, who has gone over numbers. Steve would be free to talk with him, of course. Thoughts? And McEntee says, I will relay to the boss what's the best number for Steve if he decides to call. And then I understand that's probably the name that Miss Preet gave more Mr. Bannon. And then the response by Kimberly Guilfoyle is, I have no recollection of this whatsoever. And if you'll recall from the deposition of Cassidy Hutchinson said that what the Trump lawyers were telling them to just say is we have no recollection and just basically deny, and say that we have no recollection at all. Then when you go to just page 264 of the deposition, and in 264, line 12, we have Kimberly Guilfoyle sharing her views of the election. And she goes, yeah, I don't know the challenge it forever people. I mean, you look at the facts, you look at evidence, and he would want to make sure the election was, fair and that there were legal ballots were cast. And I think it was concerning, and it still is concerning that President Trump, received 13 million more votes in the 2020 election than he did in 2016. So that would make him the first, American president to lose an election receiving more votes than he did in his first term. And having been traveling across the country with him at all these rallies, all of these stops, I mean, we did thousands, and seeing the enthusiasm and just the lines all the way out, down the streets, down freeways, people waiting days ahead of time. It was unbelievable the amount of enthusiasm, more so than, we even saw in 2016. And the people and the support he had. So it just did not make a lot of sense to see that Joe Biden, who could barely hardly any people could barely get hardly any people to come to any of his events, all of a sudden turned out all of these votes. So that's her proposition to the January 6th committee. So it just did not make a lot of sense to see that Joe Biden, who could barely get like hardly any people to come to any of his events, all of a sudden turned out all of these votes. That's on page 264 and 265. And then you go to page 236 and, you know, someone, again, she's a lawyer, she's in the know, and just to see her complete lack of transparency with the January 6th committee, one of the things that is asked is, question, okay, did you ever have any discussion with people who were alternate electors either on or before January 6th? And her response was, what's an alternate elector? Question, well, have you heard the term before? Answer, alternate elector? Question, yeah. Answer, yeah, I've heard of it, but I really don't know what it is. Question, do you have a general understanding of what people mean when they say that or what they're referencing? No, not really, I don't. And then the questioner goes on to explain. But you see here again just a combination of the kind of lies, the weirdness, living in this MAGA echo chamber. I mean, they're talking during an insurrection about YMCA, and she's so proud that she's a good dancer, and the fact that Biden's rallies were not as big as Trump rallies because people who voted for Biden weren't part of a cult, that was the basis for her to say all of these things. The fact that there's communications with her or about her referencing Steve Bannon. She denies them and says she doesn't recall. And even when it comes to the, fee itself, she acts like, it wasn't for January 6th. So the questioner has to then show her, no, this specifically says January 6th. And she goes, well, I guess that's what it says. But that's what we're dealing with here, folks. And this is what MAGA extremism is. Weird liars, just desperate. Very, very, very sad to see this, but it is what it is. We'll call it out here on the MeidasTouch network. And she is an extremist, liar, and traitor to this country. I'm Ben Meiselas from the MeidasTouch network. Hit the subscribe button. We're on our way to 1 million subscribers thanks to your support. And in addition to hitting the subscribe button, check us out at patreon.com/MeidasTouch, patreon.com/MeidasTouch. We have lots of exclusive content there. Most importantly, help grow this independent media platform. Until next time, I'm Ben Meiselas.
MeidasTouch is unapologetically pro-democracy. And look, we know you are too. So please make sure you check out our best-selling shirt and our best-selling gear, the unapologetically pro-democracy gear. And hey, while you're at it, make sure you check out my favorite shirt and one of our most famous designs. It wasn't rigged, you're just a loser. At store.MeidasTouch.com. That's store.MeidasTouch.com.